pick up on that other story of the reaction now to the United States abortion rights ruling from the Supreme Court, which has overturned the 1973 Roe versus Wade ruling. That ruling basically allowed women in the country for close to 50 years the right to abort or basically terminate a pregnancy. Many of the people who've now filled the streets outside Washington are saying that this has taken the rights of women back. Let's show you some of the reaction now from some prominent Americans, including the former President Barack Obama, who tweeted tonight saying, "Today the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, it relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the whims of politicians and ideologues attacking the essential freedoms of millions of Americans." Nick Headley tweets that in the land of the free, women no longer have abortion rights under the Constitution, but don't take away my damn gun rights, he says. The founding fathers said that's sacred. That, by the way, that line is in particular, is in reaction to a ruling from the Supreme Court yesterday, which basically overturned a law in New York that would tighten gun access or gun control laws. Corey Bush tweeting as well, saying abortion is health care. It was so before this and will remain so after this. We don't care what a far-right extremist Supreme Court that is in a crisis of legitimacy says. Your racist, sexist, classist ruling won't stop us from accessing the care we need. Let's put all of this into perspective. I'm joined tonight by the acting news editor at the Bhekisisa Center for Health Journalism, Joan van Dyke. Joan, a very good evening to you. Put in context for our local audience what exactly this ruling in the U.S. means for women in those states.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me. I mean, in reality, for South Africa, this ruling means very little legally. South Africa has incredible abortion laws, something that American feminists would dream of. And it's really not likely to change anything legally for people in South Africa who might seek to terminate a pregnancy. The biggest threat for South Africans is a political one. The fact that a nation like the U.S. has now repealed abortion rights might mean that the funding flows to civil society organizations that support abortion might dry up, and those donor dollars will then instead be funneled to anti-abortion groups. In South Africa, we've had a little bit of political parties like the ACDP trying to oppose abortion. They have failed twice, but when there's more funding and a country like the U.S. supporting a move like this, this issue might gain legitimacy and kind of destabilize the situation in South Africa. The other thing that might happen is that there's a little bit more confusion about the gag rule. Whatever happens in the U.S., as we know, the rest of the world kind of, when they sneeze, we get a cold. And what we know from before is that whatever happens in that country, other countries kind of take their lead from that. So countries that might be aggressive towards abortion rights to start with might kind of take a few steps back and reverse some of the progress that activists in those countries have made.
And U.S. President Joe Biden, speaking a short time ago, said that the fight was not over. What options are now available for pro-choice activists in the United States?
Well, for pro-choice activists in the United States, I think what's happening there is before Roe v. Wade happened, what's different between the U.S. situation and our situation is they never had a law like we did that kicked in 1996. So what they had was just something theoretical to point to. It was an interpretation of one of the amendments to their constitution. So it was never, okay, this is the official document that ensures your right to an abortion. It was an interpretation of their right to privacy. So now all that's happened is that there's nothing to point to strike any laws that are aggressive to abortion. There's nothing to strike it down with. So that has happened before in the U.S. And they are most probably just going to revert back to that. There's going to be underground networks of pro-abortion activists that tries to make the access easier for women. But ultimately it's going to be up to the state that woman lives in. And we know that lots of the states in the U.S. already have these what's called trigger laws that they are just lying in wait for this ruling to come in, and they will make termination far more difficult to get. It has been getting more and more difficult as the years have gone on. But say you're in a state that doesn't allow abortion, you might have been able to go to the state next door to get your termination, but now those states might be, the trigger states. That so it's this, and this always affects the poorer women the most. That's what it's likely to ignite those old activist roots again.
Because what you're saying speaks to one of the issues that the activists have been raising is, even if you were a woman who wanted to terminate a pregnancy, to travel to another state just based on distance and financial cost alone is not going to be something that every woman in America can do.
I mean, it's always been that way. Unfortunately, the Roe v. Wade ruling, when it kicked in 1976, it didn't solve any of the abortion debates in America. It was still kind of up to states, and you had to kind of launch a whole legal battle to get your state to be in line with the national law that the Supreme Court had set until today. Yes, so, I mean, this is always difficult for poor women of color to get in the U.S. So that hasn't quite changed. It's something similar to what we have in South Africa, actually, that we have one of the most incredible, most liberal abortion laws, but it's still really, really hard to get a termination of a state facility, whether it's because of the stigma of a health worker or because you just don't know where to go.
Right. And just let's use a South African example. If you drive through, typically, the CBD in any large city in South Africa, you see on lampposts there'll be a contact number saying, come to so-and-so, often not a registered health professional, to help you perform an abortion, right? And what's likely to happen in the U.S., according to the activists, is that they're going to see more women either become injured or possibly killed because they will now have to go and seek abortions elsewhere illegally and performed by people who may not have the know-how to do it safely.
Absolutely. This is what we know for an absolute fact. Whatever your ideological or philosophical thoughts are about abortion, whether states should allow it, there is just an undeniable fact that when abortion is illegal, abortions don't stop. They just become less and less safe. So in South Africa, for example, to bring it back home, as soon as abortions were safer, we saw more than 90% of women actually surviving these things. There was such a big difference in people just, not going to illegal abortions because they could go to a legal state facility. There's such a big difference between life and death, and that's something that people are really worried about that they might see in the U.S.
Joan, good to speak to you. Thank you so much. She is the acting news editor at Bhekisisa Center for Health Journalism.